There were a bunch of monsters walking on the street, and they were right in their center. A girl and a guy. Are they going to die? A guy with black hair, wearing a black vest and white pants, was holding a sword with one hand, and with the other, he was holding a girl with pink hair tied in a ponytail. The guy, tired and covered in blood, refused to give up, despite the deplorable state and situation. Predatory monsters that looked like a mixture of fish and lizards, humanoid type with red eyes and wide open mouths, slowly approached them. But now everyone bent down on them at once. The guy with a mixture of determination and fear shouted to himself that he could not die here, he would get out of here alive. City prison. There was a guy sitting at the table, and a man with black hair the same as his was sitting through the window on the opposite side. Picking up the phone, the guy told his father that he was already 18 years old and he had already become an adult. He reminded his father that he had promised to tell him the truth when he came of age, the truth about the wave of monsters 8 years ago. A guy with a serious face and confidence in his blue eyes said that he wanted to clear the family name. A man in yellow prison clothes and shackles only clasped his hands, remembering the past. 8 years ago, an outbreak of a monstrous wave occurred in the city of S and became the greatest catastrophe in the history of China. The sky was filled with clouds, and thunder descended on the city with every second frequency. Explosions were heard everywhere and the city was on fire. There were different types of monsters walking in heaven and on earth. The guy's father, Zuo Fan, was the only one who survived in this sea of monsters and fire. The news said that the results of the investigation led to the fact that Zuo Fan left the city during the apocalypse. He has neglected his duty. It is a heinous crime. This was posted on all TV channels, and the same news was displayed on big screens in all cities. He was convicted as a traitor, but for his numerous services to the state, he was given a 10-year reprieve from the execution of the sentence. The guy had already been named the traitor's son for 8 years. He was kicked out of school, saying that the school was not going to be responsible, much less teach the traitor's son. He was ridiculed if he tried to get a job, saying that they could not take the son of a traitor, because their business in this case would be illegal and customers would no longer enter their establishments. He couldn't even donate blood, because doctors had to be responsible for it, according to them. The guy lasted so long because he believed in an unfair decision regarding his father, and therefore he waited for this day for an infinitely long time. The man picked up the phone and said the name of his son, Zuo Fan. He said that there was nothing much to say about what had happened, because the verdict handed down to him was true. The guy has to leave the city of Z. Let him change his name and live a better life. Hearing this, the guy was shocked. He trembled a little when his father told him to pretend that Zuo Fan did not have such a father. In anger, the guy slammed the table and shouted that he didn't believe it. His father can't be that kind of person. When the guy came out, 2 policemen standing not far away beckoned to him, calling him the son of a traitorous skin. He looked at them, and they said that the attendance fee had increased. Now 3 visits are 3 times more expensive. The surprised guy said that it was more than 1,000, from which she had grown so dramatically. The policeman shrugged his shoulders and said that this order was a fistula. They already made an exception by missing this time. The guy with the dumb face couldn't believe that everyone so easily believed that his father was a traitor. After all, he risked his life so much and made countless contributions to the development of the country. How could they think that he was a traitor? Clenching his trembling fists, the guy once again promised himself that he would definitely find out the truth. Walking down the street, he thought about the attendance fee. The previous price of $450 was already difficult for him for a month, and now it is 3 times more expensive. After he became a reserve warrior of the Shooting Star, he risked his life for a meager income. To be a full-fledged Shooting Star warrior, you need to have at least 10 points in each stat. Looking at the clock that measured his stats, he sighed from what he saw. There were 4 points, next to which there were articles. Intelligence with 11 points, physique with 8, defense with 8, and agility with 16 stats. In recent years, his physique and strength indicators have not changed, but thanks to his intelligence and agility, his reaction and speed will be better. If he really wants to clear his father's name, he can't stop investigating. His father didn't tell him much. The money for the month that he receives, taking into account all deductions, is $450, so the increase is 3 times. He didn't know what to do. He touched the necklace on his chest with tenderness. It was the only valuable thing he had left. This necklace was given to him by his mother on his birthday. She said it was made from fragments of a meteorite when the star fell. Probably it's expensive. The idea came to his mind to sell it, but he immediately slapped himself for such a thought and decided instead to take a few tasks of a higher rank in the guild. In the Hall of Mercenaries, as soon as the guy came in here, everyone started whispering behind him. not those who mocked him calling him trash. Some said that he had awakened 3 years ago, but was still the weakest of the reserve of shooting star warriors. Some said it was his karma because his father was a traitor. With a gloomy face and not listening to these noisy people, he went to the head's office. In the office, an aging man with a fox head and a white mustache was sitting in front of a computer table. Coming in, the guy called him Uncle Fatty and asked if he could find some E-rank missions for him. Slapping the guy on the top of his head, Uncle Fatty shouted at him, telling him not to call him that, but to call him Uncle Gao. He wants to be kicked out of the guild. Calming down, he sat down and taking a cigarette in his mouth set it on fire, at the same time saying that an E-rank mission with his current strength could not be a good idea. After all, going to the lair of monsters of this rank is tantamount to suicide for him. Even in an F-rank lair, he needs permission and a shooting star license. He was just lucky to have lived so long, being cannon fodder for F-rank monsters. He has no chance of surviving going up against E-ranked monsters. Saying that he knows this, the guy added that he simply has no other choice. The old man exhaled cigarette smoke and, after thinking about something for a minute, sighed and walked over to the table. He said he has a well-paid E-rank mission. Customers need a scout. This is a mission to clean up the lair of E-rank monsters and therefore it will be very dangerous there. Taking the sheet, he gave it to the guy. After reading it, he was shocked by the payment because there was $3,000. Thanks to Uncle Gao, he said that he loved him, and he said that the team is a little strange, so he needs to be careful. After leaving the guild in full uniform, with arrows in his belt and a bow in his hand, he reassured himself that E-rank missions are available to all novice shooting star warriors. He just needs to scout the territory and he'll get a decent amount of money. Seeing that they were waiting for him, he came closer and a girl with pale brown hair turned around and asked him that he was a scout recommended by Uncle Gao. The girl's hair was tied in a high ponytail, and her eyes were emerald green. She was wearing a white raincoat combined with a red swearing and short black shorts. It was the leader of the group, Muyinyu. Judging by her equipment, it looks like she was a damager, a falling star warrior of medium rank. Zuo Fan, looking at the girl's equipment, immediately noticed the monster core on her sword. She really did have a shooting star outfit. He remembered that only mid-level warriors could use shooting star equipment. The core of monsters, according to rumors, the chance of its falling out is 1 in 100,000 monsters. An incredibly valuable and expensive thing. Equipped with a shooting star, these are expensive items created from monster cores. They can greatly increase the power of a shooting star warrior. And the statistics of a mid-rank Starfall warrior at least has plus 40 stats in all characteristics. It's amazing that this is a girl his age. Shooting star warriors who have reached the average rank up to 20 years old, consider them prodigies. The gap between her and Zuo Fan is huge. The guy could not even imagine how long it would take him to reach her level. The guy said that he was a recommended mercenary and his name was Zuo Fan. After that he stretched out his hand and hoped that she doesn't think about his father because that would be unpleasant. The girl also raised her hand, but before they could squeeze each other's hands, a man with red hair thrown back got between them and squeezed his hand, said it was nice to meet you. And then, sneering contemptuously, he said that he was the piece of meat recommended by the guild. The guy frowned at his words, but then he felt pain in his arm. The red-haired man was looking down at him, squeezing his hand. The red-haired guy, whose name was Mu-Yi, was left by a girl. And an old man in a uniform similar to a white suit told him that he should be ashamed of himself for mocking the one from the reserve soldiers. The old man had white hair combed back and the same white mustache. Mu-Yi just spread out his arms and said that he was just joking and asked not to pay attention. And the guy who was still suffering pain looked at him with anger. Then the red-haired man threw him a contract that flew straight into his eye, but he easily managed to catch it with 2 fingers. Mu-Yi thought he had a quick reaction, the girl thought he was pretty good, and the old man thought he was good for scouts. Surprised that he was trembling, he admired the strength of the beginner-level shooting star war. Beginner-rank Starfall warriors can make objects become harder due to explosive power, which is what happened now. The girl was pleased, said that the guy had all the skills to become a scout. Uncle Gao was not mistaken. The girl addressing the old man as Uncle Mu left the guy to him. The old man said that according to the rules of the shooting star, members from the reserve cannot participate in E-rank raids, so he should look at the contract again and think if he has any more questions. The guy began to analyze the group. 6 people, consisting mainly of novice warriors and well-equipped, and there are even 2 middle-rank warriors with shooting star equipment. By the way, it was an old man and a girl. He nodded to himself and once again looked at the $2,000 in the contract and smiled. They will definitely cope with such a team. Smiling, He thought that an easy jackpot was waiting for him today. Leading the squad, Old Man Mu told everyone to check their equipment and they went towards the monster lair. Monster lair is a gathering place for monsters. After the changes in the world, monsters took the places abandoned by people. Firearms have almost no effect against them, and some of the monsters, on the contrary, absorb bullets and poison to become stronger. Monsters can be severely wounded with weapons made from the same ones, which is why cold steel has become so popular again. And if the hunter also owned a weapon from a high-rank monster, it was an indicator of wealth and strength. Now their group was going to the city of X, which had become an E-rank monster lair. The city, of course, was destroyed. We can say that it turned into ruins. The houses were in cracks, and half of some were left. The roads were even worse, they were ruined in some places. Previously, this place was the center of the city, but now it has become a hotbed of monsters that have not left a living place from it. The guy had already gone out to investigate and was hiding, looking at both. Nearby, he heard strange sounds that resembled the flow of a river. They were definitely fish-eating monsters of the E rank. Cautiously peering over the wall, he saw several lizard fish eating someone's meat. They looked like lizards, but blue in color and with a fin on their back. They were mutated amphibian monsters with thick and strong scales, as well as fangs that are stronger than steel. Zuo Fan, aiming at the eye of one of the lizards, shot the arrow flew exactly in one piece. But at the last moment, the lizard closed his eyes and the arrow bounced off his eyelid. Enraged, the monster roared and beckoned his brothers. They all began to step on the guy. The monster aggro was a success, and now the guy needs to hurry so that he is not devoured. The main problem was that the monsters moved much faster than the E-rank monsters described. In a ruined city, in one of the destroyed streets, a guy with black hair and a black jacket was running at full speed. And behind him, with even greater speed than his, fish lizards with thick and durable scales covering their entire body, as well as clicks that are stronger than steel, were rapidly approaching him. These damned lizards had webbing and claws from amphibians, as well as some absorption properties. One of the amphibians almost caught up with him and shot his tongue in his direction. The guy slightly changed the trajectory, which is why the tongue missed. If it wasn't Zuo Fan, who had read everything about almost all monsters and knew their features, but a simple reserve warrior from a shooting star, then he would have died in an instant here. But Zuo Fan knew that any monster has a weak spot and therefore he must pick up the moment and attack the monster. The tongue crashed into the wall, and the guy abruptly bounced off that path, made a detour, and found himself face to face with the monster. Right in the sky, he raised his bow and with 3 arrows in the string, shot aiming at the monster's unfolded tongue. One of the weaknesses of these amphibians was their long tongue, and so he got into it. He wanted to be happy, thinking that even such a low-ranking warrior like him could be useful with knowledge of weaknesses, but the amphibian only shook off the tongue and all 3 arrows fell from him, and the tongue itself tightened in a second. It looks like ordinary weapons can't do damage even to weak points. The lizard, finding him with its eyes, jerked down on him with ready claws, but the guy jumped away from the blow. Looking with concern, he did not slow down the pace of running, at the same time thinking that it looked like he was going to die this time. But when he saw the exit, he sighed with relief and quickly ducked towards the hole from the building. The monster that followed him crashed into the wall. Breathing a sigh of relief, the guy thought that this time he was lucky. Just a little more and there wouldn't be a bone left of him. With a tense face, still running, he thought about weapons. Conventional weapons are still only suitable for attracting monsters. If he wants to destroy them, then he needs at least arrows from monsters. But arrows, disposable, wouldn't that be a waste of money? Running among the buildings, still being chased by one fish hunter, he went into the building where there were other hunters and shouted that the fish hunter was here. Old Man Mu took the shield and shouted for everyone to get ready for battle, and when the monster entered the building, the white-haired old man pushed him away with his huge shield. This was Old Man Mu Hanhu and he was of average rank. The captain of the squad jumped out from behind him and cut through the monster with the ease of a bird. And Mu Yanyu was of intermediate rank. The warriors of the beginner rank, immediately after the leaders, went on the attack. Looking at all this, the guy was grinning. That's the strength of the team that can clear the E-rank lair. This time his job is very simple. With the last blow that cut the lizard in half, the girl turned to the team and heard the praise from the red-haired one. At this time, the monster, cut in half, trembled slightly, woke up with a roar, opening its wide mouth and with a jerk pushing off from the ground, raised its clawed paw. The red-nosed one shouted that it was a posthumous attack by a monster and saying that it was dangerous. Zuo Fan thought to himself that it was time for this guy to show himself as cannon fodder, and so I pushed him right into the monster's mouth. Surprised, Zuo Fan was in shock, but thanks to the incredible reaction speed, he immediately jumped to the side, crashing into the floor. He immediately took out one of the shards and threw it right into the monster's eye. This time the blow pierced the monster's eye and he screamed at the top of his voice. At this time, the girl appeared on the left side and raising the sword cut off his head. The guy was sighing, sweating, when he heard a voice in his head telling him that he had killed an E-rank monster for the first time, so the activation of the system was initiated. The voice connected to some bone and asked to wait. Surprised by this sound, the guy was looking for its source. Meanwhile, the girl told Mui, that is, the red-haired guy, to look at the corpse for the presence of a core, but he said that it wasn't his job. That's only when the girl with a frown, devilish look looked at him. He broke into a sweat and obeyed the order. The hunters built a fire and sat down in front of it. The captain's wife at this time approached Zuo Fan and handed him the newest army ration. It could help him recover quickly. Muyanyu smiled at the guy and said that he was really a good scout. The guy, averting his eyes to himself, thought that this girl is not as cold as it seems. Seeing this, Muyi became jealous and grinned rudely, saying that for cannon fodder, the guy coped well with the monster. And it's a pity that with such abilities, if he wants to continue earning as a mercenary, then he will have to be meat in other teams all his life. Muyanyu, turning coldly, told Muji to shut up, and he smiled and apologized for the truth of what he had said. All the others heard him and laughed, and the old man turned to Zuo Fan and told him not to pay attention to Mui, because he just likes to fool around. The guy Shurias thought that the old man might be a good person, but a red-haired guy. Zuo Fan was sure that he was the one who pushed him into the monster's mouth. Night came and Zuo Fan and Yinyu stood guard while the others spent the night. The guy, looking at the girl, told Tom that she could go to bed, and he would be on duty. He can't do much to help the team during the fight anyway. The girl indifferently said that according to the contract, 2 people should be on duty, so she just observes it. The guy, looking around, although to hold the conversation, asked her why they came to the city of Z, to the lair of E-rank monsters, because judging by the accent of the guys from the team, they are from the city of J. City J is located in the north. It is there that monsters first appear in China, and it is in it that the largest number of accumulations of monsters of different ranks. And you said that it was a tradition for adults in their family, and then asked him what he was doing here, because it was very dangerous at his level. The guy wanted to answer, but suddenly the ground under their feet cracked and began to collapse. Both of them looked at the ground in shock, but it was too late. The guy looked at the top, pulling his hand, although he was falling, but suddenly he saw the silhouette of a man. In the tunnel with the train's flights, Zuo Fan was looking around with glasses for a night view. He couldn't believe that the passage had collapsed by itself, just when they were on it. And Yu came up behind him and asked if he had finished the analysis, and if the passage really collapsed by itself. He confirmed, saying that it could be due to geological problems, but he thought to himself that they had collapsed to a height of more than 20 meters. Turning around and looking at the girl, Zuo Fan said that if they couldn't get out, they would have to go through another exit. The surprised girl asked if he knew the subway scheme, and the guy, smugly adjusting his glasses, said that he had carefully prepared before the raid, and thought to himself that this was the preparation of cannon fodder. Zuo Fan pointed to the path and said that if they followed it, they would soon reach the exit. Having decided on the path, they followed it. Time passed, and the penetrating light became brighter, and therefore the guy said that apparently they were moving correctly. Then he looked at the girl from under his brows. The girl didn't have night vision glasses like him, but she moved like with them. He had heard that the eyes of the middle-ranked warriors of the serving star could see in the dark as well as during the day, but this was the first time he had seen it. The girl suddenly stopped, and so Zuo Fan also stopped and asked her what was wrong, taking off his glasses for one thing. Muyanyu concentrated and looked at the front and said that there were E-rank creatures there, and there was more than one of them. The surprised guy asked why he didn't hear anything, and the girl calmed him down and said that it was nothing because the sword prompted her. The girl pulled the sword out of the scabbard, and the guy thought that this is the feeling of the sword. Warriors of the middle rank of the shooting star can have a sense of weapons. It allows you to quickly master almost any weapon, and also helps to sense danger in monsters. This is a high rank ability. The girl screamed that they were coming and got ready, and the guy took a pose, pulling out a dagger. From the depths of the tunnels, a lot of knocks began to stomp, and after a couple of seconds the silhouettes of monsters became visible, and for a couple more seconds, amphibians with open mouths were running towards them. There were not 1 or 2 of them, there were a huge number of them. The girl screamed for the guy to jump back, swung her sword and cut the monster in half from the chest. The guy wanted to help, but the girl again screamed at him to back off. With his strength, he will only get in the way. The girl released her golden aura that surrounded her like the wind, and when the monsters attacked, she cut them into one or two. The heads of the monsters fell to the left and to the right. Looking at this madness, the guy admired the power of the girl. That's what the true power of Mu Yinyu is. Based on the information that he knows, E-rank monsters are equal in strength to a medium-rank shooting star war, and she cuts them like flies of some kind. Usually, F-rank monsters are equal with beginner shooting star wars, E-rank monsters with medium wars, D-rank with advanced wars, and C-rank are equal with beginner shooting star generals, and it's one-on-one. But when there are so many monsters, it's 1.5 times more difficult. The girl didn't stop fighting and one of the monsters' heads flew straight at him. It was terrible that the head opened its mouth, and the guy raised his hand to stop him. Feeling the burning pain from the bite, he raised the dagger and cut off the head. And again, the voice of an unknown person sounded in his head, informing him that he had lost another E-rank monster, so the speed of adaptation of the system increased. At first surprised by this, he shook off these thoughts. It doesn't matter, he has to deal with more important matters first. After a while, all the monsters were defeated and the girl with the blood falling from the sword said that they should go on. Swallowing, the guy looked at the mess and nodded and went on. But when they reached the end, the exit was blocked by rocks. The surprised guy swore and said that it looked like the collapse was arranged outside. And suddenly he felt a shining sword at his throat. Not understanding what the matter was, he asked Yinyu what she was doing, but the girl with a gloomy face said that she should ask it. The guy swallowed in bewilderment with a sword at his throat and asked the girl what it meant. And the girl looked at him dispassionately and silently. Zuo Fan shouted angrily that she decided to vent her anger on cannon fodder because she couldn't get out. The girl looked coldly at his eyes, and the guy was tense to the limit. Yinyu, putting the sword back into the scabbard, said that she only made sure that all these events were accidental. With a tremor in his voice, Zuo Fan asked if the collapse of the passage and the blocked exits were not coincidences and all this was set up by someone. The girl, turning around, regretfully asked for forgiveness because they aimed at her and he was drawn in by accident. The guy with a gloomy face looked at the ground, thinking that it looked like a feud in the family of a shooting star. From the very appearance of the falling star warrior, families began to appear, which gave the most offspring from the warriors. The unbreakable rule of shooting star families was as if from a post-apocalyptic world. Kill or be killed. If they wanted to rise in the hierarchy of the family, then they had to clear the monster dungeon, as well as fight with other members of their family. The girl, blowing with the wind, asked the guy if there was another way out, more inconspicuous. Zuo Fan asked to give him time to think and, closing his eyes, presented a map of the city and the subway road. Suddenly seeing the exit, he exclaimed that there was one and ran in his direction, at the same time telling the girl about the passage. The passage was at the entrance of the subway. They passed by it when they came here, although it was blocked, but there were many gaps left. He had explored this place, and he was sure that there was definitely a passage there. They will surely be able to get out if they go there. The girl smiled and thanked him, because she was incredibly lucky to be in the same group with him. Already out of breath, the guy said that if it was true, then he had wanted to ask her something for a long time. The girl, thinking about something, told him to run faster, but the guy on his last breath asked her to run slower, because he barely holds his breath. Yinyu agreed and they stopped for a while to take a break. The guy falling to the ground justified himself by the fact that the air does not circulate here, so he gets tired so quickly. The girl, looking at him with a mute face, muttered that she understood. Then she asked what happened, that because of the money. Even though he was just a reserve, he went to the E-rank dungeon. Looking emotionlessly into the pain and holding the amulet, he thought to himself that he needed large sums. Because why would a reserve go to such a dangerous place? It's just that there are less than 2 years left before his father's sentence is suspended, and he was obliged to find out the truth before that time. Clutching the pendant of gifts from his mother, he remembered that day, that sunset, in which his father and mother hugged each other and had a conversation. The guy's mother said that if there were no monsters here, she would be able to go to where they first met. The guy's father said that he would do the same, but then hugging his wife tighter. He said that when he destroyed all the monsters, they would go to that shore together. In the same year, the guy's mother died. He was told that she was trying to save someone, and died from the clutches of a small monster. Then, because of his youth, he did not understand what was going on. He only observed his mother's name on the list of the dead. Jin Junlin, clenching his fist, he thought that his father, who had lost his wife because of monsters, could not just run away. The clue to the story is hidden somewhere in it. Seeing how the guy tensed and frowned, the girl asked for forgiveness, saying that she shouldn't have asked so many questions. Zuo Fan, without saying anything, got up from his seat and said that he had rested enough and therefore they could go. After a while, they went outside, but arrows immediately flew at them. The girl, noticing this, bent Zuo Fan down and they fell to the floor below. The arrows did not stop feeding, and therefore, holding the guy and squeezing him to herself, she hid behind a stone. The surprised guy asked what happened, but Inu fell to the ground and then he saw an arrow piercing her shoulder. What was even worse was that the arrow was poisoned. He shouted that he would have to pull out the arrow to neutralize the poison, and that she would have to be patient. After taking out the poison, he put it carefully on the stones and said that he had taken the antidote with him and gave it to the girl. The pale-faced girl said she never thought his Uncle Han who would betray her. The white-haired old man, looking from the hill at the hole where Inu fell, laughed and said that there was no need to blame him. He admired the fact that she survived the dodge of poisoned arrows. This is truly worthy of the prodigy of the Mu family of the new generation. Zuo Fan, hiding behind a rock, looked at the top, thinking that from the very beginning this mission was a trap for the girl. The girl, still hiding, but already pulling out the sword, asked the old man why he betrayed them. Because his father saved his whole family, and even saw him marry her aunt. The old man, grinning, said that people take risks for the sake of wealth. Can't he betray them if it's profitable? Taking the remote control from the explosives in his hands, he said that he knew how strong the girl was and therefore did not want to pull. The old man pressed the red button and there was an explosion. Then, against the background of the explosion, he looked at Mu Yi and asked if they had all the monsters inside. And the red-nosed one, smiling, said that he guaranteed that they would die. Laughing, the old man said that the traitor's son had ambushed the daughter of the Mu family. Isn't that what everyone believes? The ground was dripping with shelter. Mu Yinyu was leaning on Zuo Fan's shoulder. The sweating guy said that at the very last minute they were able to get back into the subway and were able to escape from the explosion. But they got stuck again. The girl asked him if he felt anything, and then looking at the hand from which the blood was dripping, she screamed that bait for fish lovers had been added to the poison. Gritting his teeth, Zuo Fan said that this bastard had carefully prepared for her death. The pale girl said that it wasn't just for the sake of killing, he also wanted to blame the blame for her murders on him. Realizing this, he realized that if he died with Yinyu, then all the anger would turn towards him and most likely the head of the Mu family would vent all the anger on his father. Then the postponement of the father's sentence can be replaced by death. Clenching his fist and frowning, he said that he had to get out alive. One of the monsters surrounding them shot out a tongue. The girl, seeing this, pushed the guy away and swung her sword and cut the lizard's tongue. The guy was surprised and looked at her with concern, and she said she could still fight. The guy asked her to give him time to remember if there was still a way out and closed his eyes imagining the map. And then he shouted that there was another place where they could get out. At this time, the girl cut one of the monsters and told him to hurry up. The girl cut a path for them and allowed the guy to lead on, and she got rid of those monsters that were catching up with them. The guy said that they had already been there where the exit is blocked. There are many small gaps through which you can find your way to the outside. The girl aligned with him, asked if they were far away, and the guy replied that there were 3 turns. He looked at the girl and thought that the blood on her body had turned black. If she continued to fight, the antidote would have no effect. Reproaching himself for his uselessness, he ran faster. Having reached the goal, the guy pointed to the top and said that the wind was blowing from there if they tried. Then they can get out. But the girl told him that it would not be easy to escape. Turning around, the guy saw a huge monster 3 to 4 times his fellow lizard fish. He used to them. The girl, taking the sword with both hands, said that she would try to detain them and let him crawl up. Zuo Fan hesitated, but the girl said it was her fault, and the poison with the bait will not let her escape from the monsters. The girl concentrated and told him not to hesitate, because even if one of them survives, it will already be good. Gritting his teeth, the guy turned and ran towards the gaps. He began to disassemble the stones and dig up, thinking to himself that he needed to clear the way. The only way he could come up with a way to escape with her. Hurrying himself mentally, he dismantled the stones faster and faster, and so he cleared the passage, but he wasn't done with it. Zuo Fan set a trap of a network of wires linking them between the walls and called Yinyu to run to him. Turning, the girl rolled down and went through the wire, but the monsters got stuck. Quickly running forward, they began to get out of this place. And so, between the falling stones, they slipped into a small hole that the guy made, and after them there was a collapse and this hole closed. Sighing, Zuo Fan happily said that they got out. Inu thanked him and wanted to give something, but her sword vibrated telling her about the danger. The girl turned her head and saw hundreds of monsters running towards them. Seeing them, Zuo Fan turned pale, and his eyes filled with despair. And the girl fell down without strength and asked him to run. Seeing this, the guy took out the girl's sword and picked her up in his arms and sarcastically thought to himself where to run to. And then he looked at the horde of monsters and chuckled to himself. After all, he has never faced a rank E monster face to face. Shouting for the monster to attack, he thought to himself that if he died, he would definitely take one with him. A fish eater with claws on a preponderance bent down on him and he swung his sword and cut off his head. The head flew off his shoulders, but finally the monster shot his tongue and hit the guy right in the chest. Spitting blood, Zuo Fan unwillingly let go of the sword and looked at the wound, mentally saying that he is sorry. Apparently he will not be able to return the honor of his father's name. He fell to the ground and, as if he had fallen to the bottom of the sea, began to think that he was really sorry if he had been at least a little stronger. At this time, a sound rang out in his head again, saying that he had lost 3 fishworms in total and the energy collection was completed. Then his pendant glowed brightly and the inscription appeared in his thoughts again, saying that the system of the god of war was activated. A window with a red stripe appeared in front of the guy's eyes, the strip of which was almost lowered to the end, and also a text telling him that he was in danger, and he should appoint an emergency assistant. The guy thought, not believing that he was going to die and why he was seeing it. Friend, a new letter came out saying that the God of War's system had activated all the stored energy, and that 100 stat points will be returned to him. Then a message came out that his status was detected, and therefore the system will automatically distribute the points of characteristics. Feeling his body filled with liveliness, the guy came to his senses and a voice sounded in his head. His intelligence -41, physique -28, defense 28, and agility 46. Then the voice asked Zuo Fan to check his condition. The guy woke up with a deep sigh and asked himself what had happened. And then he grabbed the bruised place. Perplexed, he said that it was a near-death hallucination, or what? Then he touched the Ronnie and realized that it didn't hurt. No, the wound has even healed. Noticing this with surprise, he asked himself what had happened. But then looking around, he saw monsters that were heading towards the girl. The monsters looked back in surprise and saw a living person and, of course, quickly went at him. The guy immediately stood up, raised his sword and jumped back, getting ready. The monster hit the place where he was and the concrete there shattered into pieces. Surprised by his quickness, the guy thought about when his body became so light and mobile. After doing a backflip, he landed and prepared for a fight. It wasn't even the lightness, he felt as if the sword radiated boundless power. Looking at the sword, he saw a window that spoke about him. The window described the sword as an ordinary sword of a shooting star. It weighed 20 kilograms and was made with the help of rare metals and the core of a monster of the highest level of E rank. It increased strength by 45 points when used. Grinning, the guy thought that it was not surprising that Inu could cope with monsters so easily, because her sword had a monster core of the highest class of E rank. It seems that he is now able to use this sword and release all its power. Taking the sword with a reverse grip, he looked at the 2 lizards who shot tongues. Easily dodging them, he threw his dagger tied to an iron thread and pulled the thread to the left. The sword turned and cut the tongues and pushed one monster onto another. Throwing away the dagger, the guy quickly approached them and cut their heads off both of them. Smiling, he said that with the current level of strength, he is probably one of the best warriors of the initial rank of the shooting star, and with the power bonus of this sword, perhaps he can easily cope with these lizard fish. Suddenly, a letter came into his head telling him to focus on the battle, because the battle was in full swing. Grinning, he looked towards the monsters and promised that he would focus on them. Monsters looking at him felt something and began to advance. Taking Inu's sword in one hand and his dagger in the other, he grinned and said that he not only knows how to run. With a jerk, he went towards the monsters and began to cut through them. After cutting one's arm, the other 2 bit his hands. Then during the pain and clenching his teeth, he pushed them away in a rage and cut them into pieces. Marveling at his strength, he cut and cut, because he would never have to be the bottom of the team again. Falling into a rage, he cut and cut again. Finally, he will be able to control his own destiny. When he finished, he stuck the sword into the ground and clenched his teeth and shouted to himself that he had done it. Now he has real power. A window appeared in front of him where his characteristics were: intelligence 41, physique 28, defense 28, agility 46. And at the bottom there was an inscription that special distributable points of characteristics remain 21 points. Surprised by the latter, he wanted to click on them, but looking in the direction of the girl, he stopped, because there are still more important things to do. He carried the girl to the cave from which they had come out, because of the noise all the fishers had gone outside. and now the cave was relatively safe. Thanks to the mountain of fish-eating corpses, other monsters will not touch them soon. Bandaging his fists, he thought about how to get rid of the poison in Yinyu's body, because the poison attracted monsters, and this is quite troublesome. Yinyu herself was lying with a pale face, completely defenseless. The guy, seeing this, swallowed in embarrassment, but asking for forgiveness, he began to undress the girl, saying that he was sorry for it. The bait for fishmongers is a liquid with a specific smell. She can make them go crazy with one breath. After the fall of the meteorite, mutations occurred. Not only animals, but also plants were mutated. These same mutated plants began to be used as ingredients for the manufacture of all kinds of reagents. The bait for monsters was just one of thousands of possible results. Zuo Fan and Yinyu were sitting in the cave. Zuo Fan looked at the wound on the top of the girl's chest and sighed with relief. It's lucky that the wound is not deep, but still, the smell of bait comes from her and it's extremely bad. The guy picked up another reagent, said that he would have to kill the smell of bait with another reagent, and, blinking his nose, apologized to the girl. The golden goo in the test tube on the guy's arm was a reagent made from the excrement of a two-tailed skunk. Although this material is used in a lot of reagents, but mostly they drive away monsters. Preparation of reagents has been one of Zuo Fan's skills since he became a shooting star warrior. After pouring the reagent on the girl, and then bandaging her wounds, he finally put her gently to sleep, and he plugged his nose with napkins because of the abundance of bleeding. After all, because of the caustic smell of the reagent, he even bled from his nose. Sighing and sitting down to rest, the guy said that he had already washed the girl's wound and the smell of bait should also be gone. They should be safe for now. But because of the bait, the lizard fish changed the trajectory of the direction, and on top of Muhan, who can still ambush. They were trapped, but before planning an escape plan, he needs to see what's wrong with his wound. When the guy started checking the wound, he realized that the pendant made of a meteorite was missing. Could it be that it was made by the war god system? After thinking about the system, a window appeared in front of him, which said his name, condition, level, and characteristics like mental spirit with 41, physique with 28, defense with 28, and agility with 46 stats. And at the bottom there were unallocated points, of which there were 21. In the corner was his head with a bar that was slightly empty and had a green color. Thinking that after activating the system, all his wounds were healed and even the characteristics rose, he fell into thought looking at the window. It's amazing how quickly he became a novice shooting star warrior. But suddenly he remembered how he used the girl's weapon, and in perplexity asked how he could use it. Isn't it only middle-ranked shooting star warriors who can use such weapons? So why? The characteristics were of 4 types. Physique, responsible for the speed of recovery and the speed of adaptation to conditions. Strength, physical strength and attack power. Agility is the speed of movement and the speed of attack. And finally, mental spirit is a special ability of the brain. The mental spirit is very mysterious. Maybe he was able to use the sword because this characteristic of his had more than 40 points. While he was thinking, a message appeared in front of him saying that there were still 21 unallocated points and that the guy should hurry up and invest them in something and strengthen his combat power. Perplexed, he thought about the remaining stats points, and then I asked the system to explain in more detail how it works in general. The system was silent and the guy was waiting. But after a few minutes, enraged, he shouted that the system was so useless that he could not even give a hint how to do it. And at that moment he saw the changes. Red pluses appeared next to the glasses. Realizing that this happened because of his thoughts, he concluded that he could control the system with the help of thoughts. He just needs to use his brain to control the system. For the sake of experiment, he added 2 points to the force and saw how he still had 19 points left. Then, to check, he stood up and took the sword and began to swing the sword. Realizing that he really was stronger than steel, he realized how power points affect. Grinning at the fact that only he has the system of the god of war, he said that these are incredible cheats. Now he has changed his physique and strength, which were 28 and 30 and became 37 and 40. In the cave, a lone monster was walking towards an attractive smell that came from a handkerchief draped over a dead rat. At the top of one of the cave's performances, Zuo Fan stood and, grinning that the fish had bitten the hook, sent a dagger into the opposite wall. The dagger, crashing into the wall, dropped some fragments of stones and the sound of it all attracted the monster's attention. And while he was distracted, Zuo Fan appeared behind him with a raised sword and pierced his head through. It was so easy that the guy thought about the past himself. The previous one, if he had entered here and met such a monster, even with such a strong sword, he would not have been able to cope. Grinning, he felt a taste of power and raised his hand to look at him. Suddenly, a message appeared in front of him, telling him that he had received 3 points of characteristics for killing a fishworm. Surprised by this, he suddenly asked that if he kills all the local fish eaters, of which there are about 50, then get 150 points. Screaming in horror, he realized that he could easily become an advanced star warrior. Grinning, he cheered himself up and said that first he should reach the middle rank of a shooting star warrior, and only then think about other ranks. Only his physique was less than 40, the rest of his stats were either 40 or higher, so after spending points on his physique, he should already become an average shooting star warrior. Well, he did. Now all his stats were either 40 or higher, but when he looked at the status window, he saw that he was still a novice shooting star warrior. Picking up a sword and waving it, he said that although he raised his physique by 3 points, he did not become an average shooting star warrior, although his combat abilities have increased by more than 50%. Taking his dagger in his other hand, he thought that there were star generals above the star warriors. If he became so strong, then no one would dare to stop him from saving his father. Therefore, he needs to start hunting. There were mountains of corpses lying in the cave, and Zuo Fan, looking at them, said that if he used them for ingredients, he would get at least $5,000. But, of course, there were too many of them, and it would not be possible to take all of them, except only fangs and scales. But now, he grinned maliciously, and by grinding his sword against the wall, he was challenging the lizard fish to fight. And soon the trampling of monsters was heard, and several fish lizards ran to the sound. Grinning and noticing that the monsters came running pretty quickly, the guy said that he knew that their hearing would be better than their vision. Swinging his sword, he rushed at the first 2, who shot tongues in his direction. Easily dodging the tongues, the guy found himself right in front of them and with a swing of the sword, cut off both their heads. Splashed the roof, but it didn't bother the guy. Grinning, he picked up a dagger and said that the couple would disassemble them for materials. During the day, he has already destroyed 16 or even 17 fishmongers. Previously, he had to ambush even 1 fish eater, but now he can decrease by 2 or even more thanks to the meteor sword. His strength had only reached the initial level of a shooting star warrior. A window was lit up in front of him with the words that he had lost 2 fishers and received 2 points of characteristics. At first, he thought that he could get 150 points when he killed 50 fishworms, but when he reached the average level of a shooting star, he began to get 1 point for them, and now his window of characteristics was such. His condition was still light injuries, and his level was already an average star warrior. The characteristics jumped: mental spirit 41, physique 40, strength 45, dexterity 50 and 8 points not distributed. Taking the ingredients and putting them in the bag, he thought that he was too naive. He used to get 3 points because the fishmongers were stronger than him, but that's not the case now. Although he can't become an advanced shooting star warrior right now, getting out of here with Mission Yu shouldn't be a problem. At least until a higher ranked monster appears. Suddenly he stepped on the water, and then, hearing strange sounds, he became alert and immediately stuck to the stone, cautiously looking out. There was a big red 2-headed lizard walking in the water. 2 monsters mutated and became one. His fighting abilities and strength increased significantly. The guy realized that he was very dangerous. One of the 2-headed lizards suddenly turned around and seeing simple fish-eating animals shot in their direction with tongues, pierced all 3 monsters and raised them closer to him, and he took and mercilessly devoured them. In shock, the guy thought that this monster was too much for him. He killed 3 at once with 1 blow, and this is most likely the rank of an advanced shooting star warrior. While he retreated, sighing, he sat in front of Yin Yu, saying that it was very lucky that the smell of the bait would soon completely disappear, but she was still seriously injured, and without her help, he would not be able to kill that monster. But the place in which he settled is the only way out, outside nearby. Even if they can get to the other exit, there is a chance of running into Muhan Hu and the others. He carefully wanted to wipe the place of Ronnie with a handkerchief when the girl suddenly opened her eyes. He stopped, sweating, and said that if he said he was disinfecting her Ronnie, would she believe it? The girl, though she said that she believed, but brought a dagger to the guy's throat. In a panic, he said to listen to him, but still got a thump. She asked the guy about what. He killed all the fishers and brought her here, and he nodded. Yin Yu bit through the bread and said that he was good at hiding power. With a swollen face, the guy thought that it was impossible to let her know about the system of the god of war. So he began the story with the fact that his father was a military commander. The surprised girl asked about the fact that Zuo Hui, the military commander who is associated with the wave of monsters, is his father, and thought to himself that's why the guy hid his skills. Being the son of Zuo Hui, Revealing your abilities is quite dangerous. She put her hand on the top of her chest and asked for forgiveness for being dragged into the inner Boru of the Mu family. The guy nodded and said that they should focus on the idea of how to kill the two-headed crocodile. He said that she needed to return and resolve the conflict, and he also needed to return and prove his father's innocence. The girl nodded, chewing on the last remnants of bread. They came together to look at the crocodile, and the girl saw him, remembered what she had read. The two-headed crocodile is much stronger than ordinary E-rank monsters. Fishy is good to hear, but the crocodile has a high attack power. Unlike fishmongers, who use language for long-range attacks, he uses close-range attacks. With his clicks, he is able to crack even metal, and his scales are much stronger than those of the fishworms. After evolution, even the weaknesses of the fishworm disappeared. Looking at the crocodile, the girl said that they would have to use the meteor sword at full power, and therefore she activated it. The weapon that is the mainstay of people in the fight against monsters, and the most powerful part of the shooting star weapon is its core. It exudes tremendous energy. With a non-sharpened shooting star weapon, you can easily cut the skin of an E-rank monster, but this is not enough to injure a two-headed monstrator. After all, he is an E-rank mutant, and the strength of mutants has been increased by 50%. While the girl was explaining all this and, for example, cut the skin of a fishworm with equals, the guy was crying to himself, because this skin could become money in the future. But the girl, not knowing his worries, continued her speech. The two-headed monster has no visible weaknesses. The easiest way to defeat him is to cut off both of his heads, and for this you need to unleash the full power of the sword of the shooting star. Tapping the dagger on the sword, she asked if he had any questions. The guy rubbed his chin and asked where she got this dagger. It looks quite expensive. He did not see him when he was treating Ronnie because of his words. The girl blushed and said in anger that it was not necessary to think about it in such a dangerous situation. If they want to defeat that monster, then they need to teach the guy to use the sword of a shooting star. Nodding, the guy watched as the girl put another fish-eating skin on the ground. But now she put several on top of each other, so the strength of the skin should increase. But even so, the guy cut with ease in that. The girl concentrated on the dagger and it shone. And then she simply cut it into several pieces by passing it over the skin. Surprised by how easily she did it, the guy admired the true power of the shooting star weapon. Wiping the sweat from her forehead, she explained that it was necessary to completely resonate with the core, the monster contained in the weapon. With resonance, the weapon will emit bright light, and its sharpness will increase significantly. But she said it can be used a limited number of times. From such a monster core is damaged. Now Zuo Fan understood why she didn't use it back then. It really looked like the trump card of a shooting star weapon. The girl said that because she was injured, she couldn't use it, so Zuo Fan should learn it. And she raised 3 fingers and said that he had 3 days. After their conversation, the guy began to fight furiously with monsters. And now another mass genocide was being carried out. With blazing eyes, the guy chopped up everything and everything that came in his way. Well, that is, only monsters that get in the way. Meanwhile, the girl was watching it from the side. To start resonating with weapons, you need to spend a lot of battles with monsters with him and learn weapons. People with great talent can do it in 6 months, and not those who can't do it in a lifetime. But the girl believed that Zuo Fan was different from them. Having reached such a level at his age, he clearly deserves the title of a genius among geniuses, and the girl sincerely believed that he could definitely do it. The guy cut another monster and looked at the sword and said that even though only half a day had passed, he was already so tired. Yin had told him that the battle with the monsters would allow him to accelerate the resonance, but he didn't feel any changes. The girl, seeing that he still had not achieved success, consoled herself with the fact that any genius would have needed at least half a month, and even she with her sword sense took 2 days to master. But they only have 3 days. If she doesn't make it to the family inheritance ritual, the consequences will be disastrous. It might hurt his father, too. Meanwhile, a window appeared in front of the guy with the image of a sword in his hand and the fact that it is deactivated. The window asked him whether to activate the sword for 10 points of characteristics. Surprised by this discovery, he asked the system why it had not mentioned this before, to which it sent a message saying that the condition for activating the E-rank shooting star weapon had only been reached now. After all, to activate it, he must be a medium-level warrior and also have 10 free points of characteristics. Having understood the conditions, the guy sighed goodbye to the points accumulated for half a day and activated the sword. The sword was shining, and before his eyes there was information that the sword was activated, and its attribute is a sharp blade of light. Swinging it, the guy easily cut through the body parts of the monsters and admired its sharpness. The girl who was looking at this covered her gaping mouth in surprise. He was able to do it in half a day. His talent is terrifying. But suddenly she frowned in disdain and then screamed at the pale guy who was lying exhausted. That resonance loads not only the core of the monster, but also the body of the one who uses it. With a contemptuous snort, she took out the potion and gave it to him, mentally thanking him. And finally they came for the heads of the two-headed monstrator. Zuo Fan jumped down on the two-headed monster with a jerk, who, seeing him, growled in all two vocal cords and shot at him with tongues. The guy, shortening from the tongue, was rapidly approaching the monster. Having reached the radius of defeat, the guy thought that if he got rid of one of his heads, the monster would weaken twice. But in an instant, the monster waved its tail, and the tail hit the guy in the stomach, and spitting blood, he flew to the wall. The girl, seeing this, became agitated and shouted his name, clenched her fists, and Zuo Fan himself, standing up, thought that he was too careless. He couldn't imagine that his tail was so strong. Everything happened so fast that he didn't even have time to use the sword. Leaning on him with an angry face, he shouted at the monster. The scariest thing was that the strength of this monster was at level D. The monstrator, seeing him, growled with both heads and jerked towards him. The guy dodged at the last moment and the monster broke the stone behind him with his jaw. After doing a backflip, the guy said that the monster has too much bite force. If it hits, it will not live. The monster turned with a roar and one of the heads shot out its tongue. But the guy, ducking, retreated. And then he approached and was distracted by the tail, which caused him to get a tongue on the shoulder. He shouted, quickly retreated and hid with one of the stones grabbing his hand. Due to the fact that the guy's skills are equal to those of an average warrior, and because he has mastered giant men, he has become too self-confident, and now he has realized it. The girl told him to retreat, because now he will not be able to defeat the monster, but in response, the guy told her to hide. She was too seriously injured. Analyzing the monster, the guy was sure that even mutated monsters have weaknesses. The crocodile's tail was responsible for the middle range, one head for the long range, and another head was designed for close combat. His strength in long range, as well as in medium melee combat, is very high. In a battle with him, it is necessary to defend and attack at the same time. This boss is no different from D-rank monsters. To kill such a monster, you need to master martial arts. For example, the art of the Yin sword. But he can't give up now. He and Yin need to get out of here urgently. If they don't come out, then he will be accused, and his father may be executed, so he needs to hurry. 12 years ago, when a wave of monsters appeared in S City, Zuo Fan's mother helped people escape, but one day she disappeared. And during his funeral, with eyes full of tears looking at the picture of his mother, little Zuo Fan asked his father why he was sure that she had died, because her corpse had not been found. The father of the guy told his beloved to rest in peace and promised that he would take care of his son. And he also promised that he would destroy all the monsters in this world and avenge her. The monster's roar brought Zuo Fan to his senses and he jumped away from the shelter, which was immediately broken by the monstrator. Landing, he raised his sword and with a gloomy face and eyes glowing with anger, the guy wiped the blood from his lips and shouted that he wanted to return home, clear his father's name and find out the truth about the wave of monsters. To do this, he will undoubtedly put his life at risk. Grabbing the sword with both hands with determination, he looked at the opponent and a window appeared in front of his eyes with the message that the desire to fight to the end was detected and therefore the perception skill was activated. Perception allowed him to feel any changes within a radius of 10 meters, thanks to which he had something like a radar, and he could even see what was happening from behind. Now there was a two-headed monster and with a roar he climbed on it. Surprised to realize that the monster slowed down, he immediately used resonance and with a jerk bent down on the monster and struck the sword, cut both heads at once. The girl looked surprised at this, and the guy wiped the shelter from his face and said that they needed to do more important things. In front of the guy's eyes, a window appeared saying that he had lost a mutant and received 3 points of characteristics. Doubting the validity of this, the guy saw the following message, which said that an E-rank core was detected. In the cave, the two-headed monster was butchered, and outside on the bridge, against the background of destroyed houses, Zuo Fan was running, with Yin Yu on his back. The confused girl said that they were almost at the exit of the monster dungeon. Due to the fact that he ducked out of the hill, the girl screamed all red, and the guy let out a stream of blood from his nose. The girl, shyly averting her eyes, told him that she was very grateful, because if it wasn't for him, she would have died there. The guy, smiling, said that she didn't have to say it, because he was just saving his life. Besides, they were on the verge of death together, there's no need to be so formal. The girl pressed against his back, asked confusedly why then he calls her Miss Inu. And the guy, too embarrassed, said that he would not be from now on. Suddenly, glimpses appeared from afar and the guy noticing it jumped back sharply and arrows fell where they were. From afar, Muyi, that red-haired guy, laughing, asked who came to them. Smiling grimly, he said that who would have thought that Miss Yinyu and cannon fodder in the form of a rat would be able to get out of the subway tunnels. And he had just brought people to save them. Two men in black suits were standing next to Krasnovalisia, and he himself was holding a crossbow in his hand. Clicking his tongue, Zuo Fan said that these damn bastards are annoying. Muji, not listening to Zuo Fan, continued talking about Yinyu, that she punched her way out through the monsters, even being wounded. Well, he didn't expect anything less from the prodigy of the Mu family, Mu Yinyu. Then he added that Uncle Han, who had allocated a team for him to rescue her, it seems he really understands how strong she is. The girl with an impassive face told him to just wait until she returned to the family, then all the participants would repay what they deserved. Grinning, Muyi said that she is very naive, because she does not think that she will be able to return to her state alive. And then, spreading his arms, he said that he had liked her for a long time, so he would not mind having fun before her death. Raising his hand, he ordered the other two to grab them. And then he said to crush the pathetic rat, and promised the one who defeated him, entertainment within you after him. Two, one with an axe, and the other with a sharp edge to each other, ran to attack Zuo Fan. Zuo Fan, enraged, quietly but gloomily, said that it looked like Muji could not distinguish a rat from a cat and cut the throats of those two. Surprised, Muji became alert and asked in surprise how Zuo Fan did it. The guy grabbing the sword with a reverse grip said that for everything that happened in the past and for what is happening now, they will repay this guy. Putting the girl on the ground, he asked him to wait a little and promised that he would finish soon. The surprised companions of Muyi talked about how it was possible that those two were the beginning wars of the shooting star. This guy must be from the reserve. How could he do that? Muyi himself, sweating, was thinking about how this rat could use the sword of a falling star. To do this, his intelligence must at least be of the level of a shooting star warrior of the average level. Shouting that he was strong because of the sword, Muyi ordered everyone to attack from a distance and not get close to him. Zuo Fan himself at this time activated his perception skill and more than one arrow could not hit him, because before it hit him, the arrow fell into his perception zone and he cut it. Thus, having cut all the arrows, he quickly approached the guys who attacked him with crossbows and cut their throats, and those who stood on the hill disappeared by hitting their foreheads with stones. Approaching the frightened Muyi, he told him in his ear that it was his turn now, calling the latter a rat for one thing. Muyi had only one thing in his mind: he didn't want to die. Sweating all over, he was afraid to even make a sound. But still, having decided, he used all his strength and turned around and ran. Zuo Fan chuckled and said that he was quite fast, although it was useless. Appearing next to him, he cut off Muji's hand, and he fell to his knees screaming because of the sharp pain. He looked at the guy with hatred, but immediately bowed his head and asked for forgiveness and not to be diminished. He even said that he would do whatever Zuo Fan wanted. Smiling, Zuo Fan said that if this little rat would fight to the death, who knows, maybe he would let him go. Realizing that this was a chance, Muyi took an arrow from the ground and shouted to the guy to die, went to him, but his head flew off his shoulders. The guy carrying Inyu on his back again said that they finally got out of this den. The girl snuggling up to the guy said that the rescue team of the Mu family should come soon. Just then the sound of a car engine rang out, and a green Hummer stopped in front of them and several people got out. And one of them in a beige suit bowed and said, Yinyu, calling her miss, that it was good that she was fine. He was a middle-aged man with dark blue hair combed back and a goatee. It was Muin, the head butler of the Mu family. The girl gave Zuo Fan a piece of paper before leaving and said that it was her contact details. The next time he came to Jinhai, she asked him to stop by. Smiling, the guy told her not to worry. When he arrives in Jinhai, he will definitely cut out this golden family. The girl laughed and said who he called the golden family. The butler Muin noticed the girl's sword at Zuo Fan's belt and thought that she had given him a sword. The girl got into the Hummer and said goodbye so that he would not forget and would definitely come for him. Zuo Fan waved back at her, smiling. The butler sitting at the helm said that this kid was the son of a traitor, and he was not worthy of her. And the girl, embarrassed, said what he was talking about. She and Zuo Fan were just teammates who selflessly fought shoulder to shoulder. With a deadly gleam in his eyes, the old man thought that he was afraid that the girl was too naive and had been fooled by this boy. If that's really the case, then you shouldn't blame him for being rude. At the scene of the recent murder, the old man Mu Hanhu cried over Mu Yi's body and said that he was late. One of the bodyguards said that they had received information that Mu Yanyu and this Zuo Fan had been taken away by Mu. They must have left Mu Yi sitting in front of his son's corpse with anger and despair. The old man shouted that Mu Yanyu and Zuo Fan would not escape the reckoning. At that time, somewhere in the city, a helicopter landed on the tower of a building and a man in army uniform, with birch hair and a muscular physique came out and asked, looking around, that this was the Kainbei prison. Behind her was a girl also in a military uniform, black and white in color and a short skirt with light blue hair and glasses framing her brown eyes. She walked behind the man and said that it looks like the prisoners are not treated badly enough. They were greeted by officers and policemen saluting, and one of them reported to him that serious attention was being paid to human rights in their prison. All prisoners are treated as they deserve. With a gloomy face and angry eyes, the guy asked that the traitor had the same good conditions. The officer said he had the worst cell in their prison. Zuo Hui was sitting in his cell and suddenly heard someone. The captain, smiling madly, said that he would take him to a better place. At this time, the guy was driving a taxi, and when he arrived, he was very happy. With something bandaged in his hand, he mentally told his father that his father was obliged to tell him the truth. Now he had the strength to help him wash away this shame. Hearing the sound of a helicopter, he raised his head and saw a spaceship over the city. It was Hua God's air prison to detain the most terrible criminals.